Welcome to Pique Your Interest, your go-to podcast for all things mortgage and real estate. Hosted by Tanner Greenwald and Tim Malaskis. We bring you expert insights to help you buy, sell, and invest with confidence. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tim, and I have a very special guest here today from Eagle Title, Brad Walsh. Brad, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
The business has evolved, and I think that the one thing that gets me a little sideways about it, and maybe it's only because I attend so much industry stuff and I can see the potential downside. Right. Law school did something for me that was tough, which was I essentially became classically trained in worst case scenario. So all I see is the bad. It's really quite an experience to be married to me, I'm sure. Fortunately, my wife sees sunshine and rainbows every day, and we offset each other. But
that's perfect.
The reality of that is that the use of AI and what the capabilities, the fraud game has gone through the roof.
Yes.
And even someone was talking to me about it yesterday. Like, even when you look at videos on social right now, you're having to second guess and saying, is this is what I'm watching real?
Isn't that wild?
It is spooky.
Yeah.
And we're watching, frankly, I feel really bad for my kids because I'm like, what is this world going to look like for you when you get to college, when you get to, your first jobs out in life? Like, what is that going to look like for you at that point? Like, it could be scary for some people.
Yes.
But I think, in our business, we're dealing with a lot of people's private information. We call it NPI, non-public information, and all we're doing is passing NPI back and forth between each other. And some people are like, well, I don't want to use a portal, I don't want to do this.
Yes.
The era of wanting to opt out of using this technology is over, as far as I'm concerned, and not because I want to force people into it. People are being reckless if they're not corresponding that way right now.
Right.
Because it is a lot of MPI, and people aren't, we always used to talk about it where agents were using their personal email addresses, their Gmail addresses, and then wondering why, all their clients' information was getting hacked, and not like, well, just go look in the mirror,
right?
And I can show you where it's happening. But it's reckless, and frankly, there's a lot of agents that don't understand they're creating personal liability for themselves that is going to be outside of the bounds of any E&O policies that they have or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they just don't understand the risks that they're taking. It's just something that's very difficult to understand until everything goes sideways, until a lot of money is lost. People at that point really don't care about relationships. Once, there's $500,000 on the line of, some cash to close missing.
Yeah.
They just start, poking around going, well, it's clearly not my fault that I didn't, verify this, but must be everyone else. So that's always fun.
Yeah. So that's the downside to technology, but I think that we would agree. I think there's some bright times ahead for those that can adapt to these e-closings or the use of AI or anything else that comes along down the road. Like, think about 5 years from now. What's going to be around that we haven't even thought of or heard of yet, right? Like, there's the potential for a lot there.
And you have to not just adapt to it, in my opinion. You have to be craving the understanding of it and running at that fire day in and day out.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we've got an aging industry. It's
100% agreed.
It's kind of wild. There's almost no other industry that I can think of that is that top heavy from how many older individuals are in it. And it's really not, it's not about ageism here on getting those people out, but it is their willingness to adapt to the technology and how much liability they can either be bringing to themselves, their organizations. And there's frankly not a whole heck of a lot of youth in our business, especially, you look at the past 2 or 3 years hasn't been a great time for new people to get in the game.
No.
And so when you start creating these gaps of time when you don't have new personnel coming in, it shows up down the line.
Oh, yeah.
And, I know at least from the Land Title Association perspective, I went into the room 15 years ago. I was the youngest person in the room. I went into the same room about 2 months ago, and I was still the youngest person in the room. And you're like, I'm not getting younger.
Right.
I'm just seeing more. But, it's just wild to see because there's not that much youth that can get in and sustain it.
Yeah.
Which, if you get, I've seen some young LOs get into the business. I've seen some young agents get into the business. And if they can get over that kind of 12 to 18 month hump, they can start gaining some traction.
Oh, yeah.
And they can be really good with, understanding how to, get into that. But it's so funny because there's people like yourself who've been doing it for a while where you understand the program so much better that that's where it's tough they don't understand. It's not just about, hey, what rate will the computer spit out for
right.
me? There's navigating a lot of different programs and things like that are critical to being successful in this business.
No, but I think that's where we can mutually benefit from having this revolution where there's younger folks coming in because they can, I'm sure that there are people out there that know a lot more about AI than I do, right? Like, so they can teach me, but I can also teach them loan programs. So like, if you're a young loan officer and you come in, there's a lot that we could do for each other to help each other grow. I think that is what the future looks like.
But it is a necessary evil so that we don't have a financial crash again.
Correct.
I think post 08, being in this business, I personally love Dodd-Frank. Like, I think did a lot for our business and made it a healthier, safer real estate environment, in my opinion. And you see that with the low rate of foreclosures that we have today.
Yeah.
It is at historical lows. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing. And if there needs to be a little bit more regulation and some hoops to jump to up front so that we can keep historical lows of that's a really good thing in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I know for a fact, having been in the business prior to, during, and now post, we are in such a consumer-friendly environment compared to where we were prior to 08. And there's a lot more burden placed on other people than the consumer, for instance, the mortgage side. But that burden helps create a stronger, more robust market. And so really in the end, that work that we're doing is the reason that we're in such good shape that we are. So from that perspective, Dodd-Frank worked wonders because you eliminated things like not having to document the fact that somebody has income or is even employed for that matter. It's so much better now.
It is. And, I think even you see, because the delinquencies are so far down and the foreclosures are so far down, people aren't having to go through, they thought, well, if I could just get the loan, I'll figure out a way to pay for it.
Right.
Well, that doesn't work when all of a sudden, I can tell you from personal experience, my first house I bought with an FHA loan with a gift from my grandfather to get in the property, and I was in law school at the time. I had $0. I mean, literal $0 to my name. And about 3 months after I moved in the house, the first hurricane came through, and I went downstairs to check the basement, and right when the storm started hitting, and the second I stepped off the bottom step to the floor, my socks were just soaking wet. And there wound up being a foundation crack that was behind a wall that we couldn't see during an inspection. But I didn't have the money at the time to make a homeowner's insurance claim.
Right.
I didn't have the money to fix it myself. So now you're in a property that you've got, you're on an FHA loan that you got no skin in that game. And you're like, okay, how am I going to get myself out of this? I had a long game. I had a good family. I had a lot of friends who supported me in doing the work ourselves. But there's a lot of people that, if they're already stretched to get there, all it takes is one, homeowners. I think that's the other thing is some people think homeownership's for everyone. In my opinion, it's absolutely not.
I would agree.
There's a lot of excellent things about homeownership. I think it's one of the single greatest things for people to build wealth and force to savings in some ways. Pre-COVID, people were buying and selling a home, generally speaking, every 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So where we're going to miss those transactions, frankly, in my opinion, is in 27, 28, 29, where those people would typically be moving to that next home.
Yeah.
And the good part for them is if they were able to make what I'll say a jump, if they were able to go from the townhouse and maybe not just get to their starter single family, but to get to their forever home,
Yep.
those people are going to have a lot of equity 15, 20 years down the road that they wouldn't have had previously.
Right.
Whether it's just equity as far as their loan's concerned, but also not paying the transactional costs in the way.
Right.
But we're going to have some missing transactions there that people really aren't talking a lot about because those behaviors aren't. But what we've seen the last 3 years is, frankly, the baby boomer generation's been much busier in their home buying game than we've seen anyone else, and they've been throwing their cash around
Right.
In a big
beating
big
everybody
way.
else up. Yeah. It's really hard to compete with cash. It's not impossible, but it's really hard to compete with cash in a market like that. So you have seen boomers buying houses in situations where you would normally think you would be seeing, millennials or, Gen Z buying a house they would typically buy, a typical starter home that, these boomers are buying, sweeping out right from under them, man.
I tell my dad's still living in the house that I grew up in, and I'm like, Dad, you got to sell. We need that, that 3-2 single family split level.
Yeah.
And he said, Brad, he goes, where can I afford to live as efficiently as I can in this house?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and it kind of caught me off guard when he said it, because I'm thinking like, hey, you're in one of the most desirable school districts in Anne Arundel County. You got all this going for you, which that house is a great starter single family home. And he's like, but it's just me.
Right.
I don't want to go to a condo where I got to pay a monthly fee and I need to, do X, Y, and Z. He goes, and the other side, he goes, I lived in this house for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Because I know what's wrong with this place, because I'm not guessing what's going to be wrong with the next one. Because believe me, they're not all perfect.
Right.
No matter how good they look, there's some lipstick out there.
No, definitely. It's interesting because we talk about the lock-in effect, right? People feel locked into their interest rate. They have, at 2 3/4, 3%, 3.25%, whatever it is. And, rates are higher than that now, right? Like you're talking about a 6 or a 7 some days. And I think that a lot of the talk is around being locked into the interest rate. I think it's also about pricing, like the price of housing. The price of housing has increased so significantly that even if we were looking at lower rates, a 4% interest rate or a 5% interest rate, the payment shock that you see, the difference in what you're paying now and the difference in what you'd be paying if you bought another house is significant enough that it keeps people in their house. So it's not just the rate, but it's the fact that prices have gone up so much that creates this, this lock-in effect that everybody talks about.
And I personally struggle with the lock-in effect concept. There's 40% it's actually over 40% of people in the United States who own a home that don't have any mortgage on it right now. Now, where is that largely vested? It's in the boomers we were just talking about, right? So I'm not talking about your millennials who are trying to find their way through life. I came out of college in 2007, right as everything was really hitting the fan. And, there's a lot of people in my generation that, we've never seen that really great side of the work life, world because we've been living through this show.
Right.
But, they still have the dream of home ownership, but because so much of the equities stayed with the boomers in these properties, those people, as I said, they're my dad. My dad's the problem, okay? My dad and people like my dad are the problem, but they've got good reasons why they want to do that. And they've got this flexibility now. I always love asking people when they're moving here from out of state, as an example, like, well, why are you moving here? Like, I just love asking the question at the table. And, sometimes people are, they're moving from California to Maryland. I'm like, why are you moving here? And they're like, I want to be close to my grandkids. Like, they're buying these single family homes, like, because they just want to be close to their grandkids. Yeah. They want to do whatever. And I'm like, okay, I live a mile from the house I grew up in, so I never really made it that far to make my parents, travel to see me. But, but it is an interesting concept. And, there are a lot of people who feel locked into it. My whole conversation around that for me is your life is still changing and life is still happening. people are having kids. People are, you've got death, divorce, more babies coming. Like, you got all those life factors that are still coming here. That was the one thing about COVID is for a while there, a lot of people were like hunkered down together.
Oh yeah.
We saw a lot of divorce on the
A lot of divorce
that.
after that. Yep.
And then, and then even when the rates were a little bit higher, frankly, some people couldn't afford to get divorced. Yeah. Like, they couldn't afford to live on their own. So you have these really unique living situations that they're just starting to come out of. I think if we see some movement with the interest rates, we're going to see more inventory get unlocked. And I'm not saying down to 3%.
Right.
Like, if we saw something that was like 6 even or even began with a 5, this thing's going to be on like Donkey Kong. Yep. And I think it almost might be worse than COVID in some ways because people are going to be, especially if they had already gone through that, they're going to know what to do this time.
Right.
And to your point, the rates are up, but the values haven't seen any dip. Like, we actually have seen price growth for the median home sale average continue to go up over the past even 3 years as the rates went up. So people are like, all right, so now I still have to pay for a more expensive home plus the higher rate.
Should have bought 3 years ago.
Yeah. Or, and that's the thing, you look at it and you're like, yeah, but they're not going down. So you're either going to put your life on hold. If you live in a crappy house or the school district's not what you want or there's something that's not being there.
Yep.
There's going to, maybe it's not today that you're going to get off the, that's not going to move the needle. Might be tomorrow.
Right.
You never know. Like, if the wife's banging on the door one day going like, we need more bathrooms, we need more bedrooms, we need more space or we're all going to go insane.
Right.
Those are the types of things that people finally get off that hump. And, and you're seeing the average national interest rate for what people have, that's starting to rise.
Right.
And so that's where I look at it personally saying, all right, that lock-in effect is starting to soften.
Right.
Because no matter how good your interest rate is, if your situation isn't good, some people are resilient and can work through that, but other people are like, yeah, we got to just get off this hump here.
Sometimes you run into situations that are only solvable by getting a new house. Your family is increasing such to the point that you can't fit into the house that you're in now, or your family has decreased in the size and you don't need all of the space that you have. It's too much to maintain, whatever the case is. So I think you're right. I think there is a softening in the lock-in effect. I think it's still it's very prevalent in some people.
I'm not saying it's not real, and it's not real to a lot of people.
Yeah. But there's good reasons why maybe you shouldn't feel locked in as much as you do.
The data is starting to show that.
Yeah, that's good.
But I do think like there's definitely people who are like, I'm doing this and I'm never leaving. And I never say never about anything because
never's a long time.
Never is a really, really long time, and really a lot of certainty around why you're not doing something.
All right. Well, Brad, thanks for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. It's been great. So, guys, Brad Walsh, Eagle Title, if you know all your title needs. And again, I'm Tim at First Home. If there's anything I can do to help you, Brad and I are just a call away. We'll see you next time.
Thanks,
everyone. Bye.